Worry focuses on what's beyond your control and often results in inaction. Concern focuses on the challenges and often moves us to action. Hey everyone, welcome to Make Your Money Matter. I'm your host, Brad Barrett. I'm also a managing director and partner here at One Capital Management. And I'm here each and every week to help you navigate through your financial journey because after all, your money matters. Hey, have you ever noticed when you focus on problems, you acquire more problems? Or when you focus on maybe possibilities, you'll actually have more opportunities. You don't want to give up on something you really want. It's difficult to wait, but even worse, to regret. Think about that for a second. Now, when it comes to our money and why I'm bringing that up is what are some of the ideas and things that we think about constantly? Maybe it's financial freedom around our money or not running out of money. Maybe it's paying off some debt or maybe even just understanding the best use of our debt. And I want to talk about all of that today here on the Make Your Money Matter show and talk about it in the context of a poll. Which I actually found a bit shocking. And it proves to me, and it proves that I think so many Americans right now in 2022 are worried about what? Their money and their investments. But before we get started, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. All right, let's get into it. So recently, a poll came out by Kiplinger, which is a well-known investment publication resources, as well as Athene, which is more of a retirement household. And the poll was titled, Retirees are worried about money. Now, anyone watching or listening to me right now, probably like, yeah, sounds about like me. And I want to read this poll and talk about some things and bring us some ideas more than anything here for us to think about not only what we are all thinking right now, as I've shared pretty much the entire year of 2022 around the concerns of a recession and inflation, even down to things like healthcare costs and taxes. I mean, they're all weighing on everyone. And I also think for retirees and near retirees, those that are maybe 5 or 10 years out, I want to share some of these polls and really what we've been talking about here at our firm, at One Capital Management, with all of our clients. I think some of these stats that I'm going to bring up here today will actually help us. It almost allows us to be part of a community to realize, hey, I'm not the only one fearful of this. And as many of our clients know, those that might be watching or listening right now, during our review meetings, and for myself as a financial advisor for nearly 20 years, we're boots on the ground. We talk about this stuff all the time. And so when I read this poll doing our research, I wanted to share it. And this poll I thought was an interesting one, really, for those two contexts. And I'm going to go and focus on a few things. But let's just, first off, remove the elephant in the room real quickly, okay? We're in a bear market. We know that. What does that mean? For those that don't understand that, it's a rule of thumb. It really is when the market drops above 20% or below 20%, I should say, we're in a bear market. And it's a bummer. Look, no one likes it. But here's the reality, and I've stated this before. There have been about 11 bear markets just since 1950. And if you think about that, that's one about every 7 years, which means in really broad strokes here, we endure essentially one bad year of the market for every 6 good ones. Now, obviously, this isn't a predictable pattern necessarily. Don't go, making your retirement plans on that. But it would be great if we could sit out the bad years, right? I mean, that's the stork analogy, like that. Oh, that dreaming. Oh, I'll just avoid the 1 year and then I'll be all there for the good 6 years, right? And again, the ups and downs, they seem random and they seem chaotic, but beneath the chaos is some simple truth. The companies of the world out there, globally, domestically, all over the world, internationally, they're working, growing, innovating, still selling, and yes, still profiting. And despite the short-term speculation about their value, which we've seen this year, the long-term growth will typically be returned to the owners of all those who are investing, like you and I in the market. They'll be returned to those who are investing in these companies. So I want to start off today by saying we don't want to feel too bad about seeing down numbers for the moment. For anyone thinking right now, that elephant in the room I discussed right now around, just feeling bad about themselves, they did something wrong, or just not trusting their advisor, you have to understand the market is volatile right now. We have a lot of things hitting us with headwind inflation, recession discussions, a political environment that we're just not truly understanding it. And you want to understand something very clearly. Sticking to your plan and the discipline, as I share each week on the Make Your Money Matter show, matters. And the volatility we're seeing is a whole other animal right now. Market volatility has really led to what I'm seeing in my practice, and I want to share here on the show, is leading to a shifting of perceptions. And what I think constitutes a secure plan or retirement doesn't really rest on the bedrock of emotions or sentiment. You have to be disciplined in this. And again, the poll I want to reference, again, is by Kiplinger and Athene, which is a retirement services company and a publisher. And the poll goes through the top concerns of retirees or near retirees and includes items of a recession, the financial security of Social Security, and then the cost of healthcare. So I want to pick a few that I thought would be good to bring up on the show today from this poll that I thought, again, were relevant for what we're going to go through. Again, the setup here really is important to understand what others are thinking, not to necessarily validate our feelings because we're all independent, okay, and how we think and how we go through our things, but everyone is on their own financial journey. So I want to bring up the first question here. The first question I thought was interesting is, are you worried about the following economic issues in retirement? Now, the poll actually goes and shows a couple of graphs. I'm going to pick a few out here. So the first issue it brought up in its study in this poll here of economic issues was rising interest rates. Now get this, 48% of retirees said they were worried about rising interest rates versus 59% of pre-retirees or not retired yet said they were worried about rising interest rates. Now, I want to ask, are you worried about a recession? Because that was the next question. Are you worried about a recession? 72% of retirees said yes. 77% of pre-retirees said yes. How about stock market volatility? This poll went through it. Stock market volatility, also known maybe right now as a bear market, 57% of retirees said that they were concerned or worried versus 64% of pre-retirees. Now, here's what I want to bring up here real quickly, and we'll stop for a second. What's interesting about these first few to me is that the pre-retirees, those not retired, on 2 out of the 3 questions I just brought up, rising interest rates, recession, and stock market volatility, were more concerned than the retirees. Now, you might be thinking about that. Why would a pre-retiree, someone still making money, be more concerned than someone in retirement? Now, I've been around this game a long time, and I'll say this, and I think this is where psychology really comes in when it comes to our investments and planning. And on that, if you haven't checked it out, you can go watch my video on the psychology of money. It dives deeper into what I'm discussing right now. But what I want to bring up here is we get really fearful of the whole notion of the more you have, the more you have to lose. It's studied in psychology, had a lot to do with money in that regard. And once you're in retirement, you're on that fixed income or that predictable or sometimes used, guaranteed income of maybe Social Security or a pension or other income stream or business venture. But the reality is this, the psychology of a pre-retiree, someone who's not retired yet, being more concerned while they're still actually making potentially more money than a retiree, has nothing to do with the money itself. It actually, to me, been in this game long enough to know that they haven't actually seen that next stage of life. Those that are answering this poll, in my opinion, right, that are a little bit less concerned because they're retired, the concern of that unknown has been removed. They're in retirement now, so they're no longer like fearing that financial cliff of going from working years to retirement years. So it removes, as you can see in some of these delta points here, right? Just take the rising interest rates as an example. 59% of pre-retirees said that they were concerned versus 48% of retirees, 11% difference. And I think, and this is a subjective opinion by myself, is my experience has been is that 11% is largely made up of the same fears as the retirees have. They just also have the additional fear of not being in retirement yet. Those that are answering this question who are in retirement say, okay, I got through that phase. Now I understand what retirement is. Still have fear of the market, but I'm less fearful of that than I was a year ago when I retired. Okay. So to put a bow on that comment I just made is they're thinking in the psychology, right, is I'm retired. There's nothing I can do about it. So although I'm worried like my counterparts of those that aren't retired, I'm less worried than I was before when I was working because I've already gone through that cliff in sense of like that next phase of life. And it's interesting to think about when you really think about the psychology of things, because you would think that a retiree on a fixed income is probably more concerned about a recession or stock market volatility or rising interest rates, but that's just not the case. And this poll actually kind of shows that. Now, the other question that I liked from this poll was, are you concerned that inflation could cause serious economic hardships for you in retirement? 64% of the retirees, those that are retired, said yes, versus 77% of the pre-retirees, people who aren't retired, said yes. Again, a 13% difference between the pre-retirees and the retired who are more concerned about inflation. Very interesting. Now, the no's, I think, are also interesting. There were 20%, look at the flip side of this, right? There were 20% of retirees that said no, they're not concerned that inflation could cause serious economic hardship. And 13% of the non-retired said they weren't concerned. They said no. So again, this isn't totally shocking to me as I read this, that the overwhelming aspect of people who are concerned about economic issues, I mentioned of a recession or stock market volatility or this question of inflation could cause more serious economic hardship. It's not shocking that the overwhelming aspect, I'm not giving anybody an aha moment who's watching or listening right now. It's not the aspect here of both retirees and pre-retirees are concerned. We see that. And that's really what I wanted to share, the notion of you're not alone. And I know, again, I'm not surprising anyone by these numbers. And I wasn't totally surprised by a lot of these other than the fact that the pre-retirees and the retirees, what I wanted to share was this community of just understand that you're not alone. This is where advisor and counsel comes in. Talk with them. If you don't have one, reach out to us. That's what we're here for. That's what a good advisor will do. And with that, speaking of these fears, volatility, this is the word that's been used, right? Volatility isn't something fun to necessarily live through, but it is a part of market cycles. We just have to know that. Anyone who says otherwise is just flat wrong. Like there is volatile periods in our life, in the markets. It's just a part of this world, okay? And again, to reiterate what I've been saying, it's what we don't do in these times, the volatile times, that almost matter more. If we let our emotions get a hold of us, that might actually go against our rationale or our logical with discipline and discernment. If you have a plan, if you've gone through a plan with your advisor, okay, and you have an advisor who's helping you get to that plan, get to those goals, talk with them. It's important. Communication, I think, is key amongst all else. Look, God didn't remove the Red Sea. He parted it. It's a big difference. Sometimes in our life, God doesn't necessarily remove our problems. Let's say in this case, it's volatility. I'm using an example of money. No one likes to see volatility in their money go down, but it could be anything. He doesn't necessarily remove your problems. He makes a way through it. His delay on items or certain things in life isn't necessarily his denial. And for those thinking right now, this investments are never going to come back, this draconian doom and gloom, you have to look at the long game. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we've had 11 bear markets since 1950. That's basically one every 7 years. Or said differently, we have one bad year for 6 good years. And I think, again, if you're not retired, maybe you're still working, it's a little bit different in some of these answers that I was going through on the polls right here than those who are actually retired. And I think that, again, the key difference is just an experience. And I think, I can't prove this, obviously. My opinion is that the difference of those that are more concerned as pre-retirees is really because there's a part of the concern that you haven't been in retirement yet. And I think that's one of the key takeaways here, other than just money and what the polls are saying here. Just recently, Jeremy Siegel, who I love, he's the professor of finance at University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. He joined CNBC to discuss the performance of a couple of things of corporate earnings, progress on bringing down inflation, and core rates staying high. And as I mentioned, I've always had a passion for Professor Siegel. I learned about him, 20 plus years ago in economic school. And so I wanted to play a quick clip of his comments. And again, he stated that there has been a lot of progress on inflation. And I think it's relevant to what I've actually been discussing here on the show, and I want to respond to it. Here's the clip.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a pivot soon. And I don't mean that means they're not going to increase. I think it's going to be 75 basis points next week. But I think they're going to acknowledge that there has been a tremendous amount of progress made on inflation.
So I want to break this down a little bit. He mentioned they, and obviously by that he means the Fed, they're going to look at things and see that there's progress being made. And although this week, as you're watching this right now, they're going to be voting on another federal rate increase here. And we're likely assuming 75 basis points, but the market may surprise us a little bit. But the pivot is what I really want to talk about here. And this is something I shared on a lot of the recession conversations we've been having, this whole notion of, are we in a recession? What does that mean? When the Fed raises rates, the idea is to raise rates enough to stall the economy, to stall the demand for things, the production, not the production of supply, but the production of wanting to buy things in the market. Remember, there's too much money chasing too few of goods. That's essentially inflation 101, right? So when you raise rates enough, and what he's talking about when he calls it progress, that's when you can kind of stall it out. Maybe the NBER comes out and says we're in a recession because now we have, corporate profits growth going down, things like that. That's when we'll start seeing the word recession flowing around. But as I mentioned a week or two ago on the show too, that's not really going to change how you and I have viewed this year. I mean, we know we're paying more at the gas pump. We know all these things have been going on. So it's not, someone labeling it a recession is not really going to change it. But I agree with the professor is what I'm trying to bring up here is I think there's been a lot of progress made. You can see some of the numbers stalling out. As remember with inflation, when inflation doesn't go away when it goes down. That's actually called deflation, a whole other separate economic situation. Inflation stops when it stops increasing. And I share this because inflation is one of those things that are really hard for people to understand. It's not tangible. It's not like this pen. You can't touch, feel, and taste it, right? It's this thing in midair that we all know is real. And the way I share it with those, it's like if you're 50 or 60 years old, think back to your first paycheck. Think back to that cup of coffee you were buying when you were 18, 19, 20 years old. Like that's inflation. We never really go back to prices we saw before. And I think that's might be a shock to some people listening or watching that right now. We're thinking, the prices we had last year, we just need to get back to there. It's not how it works. Everything kind of rises to the occasion and we kind of try to lop it off so it doesn't keep increasing. That's the idea with what the federal rate's doing. And I think the progress that the professor is talking about is allowing them to say, okay, we don't need to raise any further. We can stall it out and then we can start actually bringing things back down, which is something that I actually think is an opinion in the next year. Maybe later next year, we're going to start to see rates coming back down. And I think that's really important as you kind of talk about this pivot, what the Fed's been doing all year. And I just really like the professor. If you haven't heard about him, he's a really, really sweet man. He's very knowledgeable, very experienced. You can always go and follow him. It brings up a notion here too. There's a book that I actually recently read called Atomic Habits. It's written by a guy named James Clear. A lot of people have probably heard of this book. It's a great book. And in there, he said something that I think was interesting about what we're seeing right now. Complaining about not achieving success despite working hard is like complaining about an ice cube not melting when you heated it from 25 degrees to 31 degrees. Essentially, your work was not wasted, it's just being stored. For some reason, when I was reading this book, I kind of highlighted it, and I wanted to bring it up because the biggest takeaway from that statement is all the action happens at 32 degrees. You don't want to be the ice cube analogy here that he's talking about. Don't stop at 31 degrees. You don't want to be like, this volatility is too much. I can't handle this. I'm going into retirement in 2 years, but you're maybe at 30 degrees, 31 degrees. Again, all the action jackson happens at 32. Don't sell yourself short by stopping at degree 30 just because there's some volatility or some fear. Now, I know that's an open-ended statement there, and I'm not by any means discounting the realness of the fear and the anxiety and the not understanding where we are going. There's a philosopher named Seneca that once said, we suffer more often in our imagination than in reality. Now, someone could also say, well, Brad, the reality is my account's down heavily right now. The market is down very heavily too. And that's all true. But the imagination and the replay going on in our brain right now, and be careful what you're telling yourself, right, is the market is down. And they're saying, it's really saying that it's never going to come back up. It's more saying this is going to last forever. This is the end. Be careful the loop you're telling yourself. And I want to share that with you because I think it's really psychologically important for us to be honest and candid with ourselves and make sure that that loop I'm mentioning that's going on in our head, we're not suffering in the imagination of what if and the doom and gloom more than we are actually suffering in reality. And again, back to my point earlier, communication is key. Talking with your advisor and going through your plan matters. There's two words that I think come up sometimes in a year like this: worry and concern. Worry focuses on what's beyond your control and often results in inaction. And I get some people sometimes that I talk to about investing and we go through this stuff, they misconstrue the two words, concern and worry. Remember, concern is the opposite side. Concern focuses on the challenges and often moves us to action. That's a good thing. Having concern in a review meeting with an advisor is a good thing. For you sitting there right now, listening and watching, being concerned is good. It moves you to action. Maybe it's to set a meeting here on the show. Maybe it's to talk it out, to realize what they are doing for you as your advisor. Or if you don't have one, maybe now's the impetus. The only difference between success and failure is taking action. And concern gets us there. That's a good thing. But worry is a whole other ballgame. So if we worry and just sit there watching news outlets and reading whatever side of the aisle you're reading, it doesn't really matter if you're worrying and not concerned because you got to understand the difference. Concern will say, okay, this is bad, not great. Who do I call? How do I approach this? What do I need to do? If you have an advisor, you're able to call them and talk through that with them and make sure you have the right action to facilitate anything you need to do, right? And so I think I really wanted to share these polls today and reveal, I guess, what the world is seeing around us. Again, not to shock and awe. I think I didn't share anything that we didn't probably know, but I wanted to, create some relevancy there and understand kind of the nuances. And it may have been relevant to you, maybe not, but I just think that it was important that we put in context what those that are retired and maybe those that are still working are thinking and feeling. And mostly, you're not alone. That's ultimately the message I want to share today on the Make Your Money Matter show. If you're overly concerned and heading towards the worry camp, talk with an advisor. Remember, being concerned is okay. That's okay. That focuses on the challenges that you have and moves you to action. The worry side usually focuses on the problems, not the solution, and leaves us to inaction. Okay, it's time to answer your questions. If you have a question or topic you'd like me to address here on the show, you can leave a comment or a question in the comment section, or if it's something more personal or you just want to go one-on-one, just go to the About page on this channel and you can send us an email. We always keep the questions I read here anonymous, so you never have to worry about your name being shared, but we would love to hear from you. So the question came in today that I really liked around stats, historical references, and what I want to share mostly, they basically asked, Brad, you mentioned these stats. Are these something you can make investment decisions on? And I share with no. Historical performance doesn't reflect future gains. That is a big thing I want to share. But it is interesting to glean on certain things. And I use these stats, like the stat I mentioned today, around we've had 11 bear markets since 1950. I shared a couple weeks ago, we've had 6 recessions since 1980. We've had 5 bear markets in that time period. We've had, 12 plus US wars. Like all these things are just numbers and stats. And no, you don't necessarily go build investment plans on this necessarily, but it is really important, I think, again, for the psychology of understanding not just myopically where you are at now, but seeing past the future. I can give you another one. Over the last 100 years, the surest sign of an oncoming financial crisis has been a Philadelphia-based baseball team winning the World Series. 1929, the Philadelphia Athletics at the time, 1980 Phillies, 2008 Phillies, 2022. We might be sitting here thinking the Astros are our only last hope. Now, obviously that's more of a joke and its relevance there. So no, I think stats are really good to understand historical reference points, but not necessarily something you want to just like bank on here and there. I think they're really important, again, like I said, more for the psychology of how you look long-term, the discipline you're putting in your planning, and then just making sense of what's going on right now. Making sense of not just the news reports today, but looking how they look contextually into the world, global politics, and then beyond just this year. So again, if you have a comment or a question you'd like me to read here, you can leave it in the comment section or email us in the About page on our channel. Now, before we go today, if you found anything helpful and want to learn more, you can visit our website at onecapital.com, where you can scan the QR code on the screen with your smartphone and it'll get you right there. You can also call or text us. Look, we want to help. There's no pressure here. We don't treat people like a number. In fact, here at One Capital Management, we value our relationships. It's the lifeblood of what we do. So click, call, or text us today. If you're not following us on social media, you should be. You can follow us at Make Your Money Matter. We are sharing great information on all of our social media platforms. And as I often say, if you like the show, share it with someone you like. And if you don't like the show, I guess, share it with someone you don't like. But until next week, always remember, make your money matter.